Well, the Democrats, they're going to try and do their show trial of Donald Trump. It'll happen in the early hours of the morning, our time. It is, of course, daytime in the United States right now. And one of the people who is ready to fight back on the behalf of the president and the 60 million people who voted for him a couple of years ago, and he's hoping more than 60 million to vote for him again in November next year, is Liz Harrington from the Republican Party. She is from the GOP and joins us now from our Washington studios. How are you, Liz? Welcome to Australia.
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
So we've explained to people on the air tonight about the role where your political opponent is also the person who is the prosecutor and judge in the trial to boot you out of office. We've also explained on the show tonight, it's a very different system you have in the US to we have here, where only one side of politics, the politics in the majority, gets to pick who goes before these show trials. That's key to understanding what's going to happen here, because anyone who proved the case behind closed doors, well, they were allowed to graduate to the show trials we're going to see over the next few days.
Right. Adam Schiff is running a commiserate for justice. This isn't anything resembling the normal U.S. justice system. He handpicks all the witnesses, and Republicans, we offered at least 8 fact witnesses that would be relevant to the discussion. First and foremost, this so-called whistleblower, who the Democrats have suddenly found not to be useful once it was revealed that he's a registered Democrat from the CIA who colluded with Adam Schiff to get this ball rolling. But none of those people are going to be allowed to testify in public because it's all Adam Schiff. And I think this is another do-over of the Mueller report and another do-over of the 2016 election. The New York Times said as much, that this is a do-over of sorts for Democrats who had put all their faith in the collusion hoax. Everything was revolved around Russia, and that now they've moved over to Ukraine to start to try to overturn the results of 2016 that way. It's not going to work, because they don't have the facts or the evidence on their side.
Yeah, I try, and I've also explained to everyone who's watching, again, one of the peculiarities here is that for an impeachment to happen, the number of Republicans who would have to vote with the Democrats is huge. There's 23 different Republicans that are up for re-election in the Senate at this upcoming election, so the maths just doesn't get you there. So to me, it's all about the politics of trying to put pressure on those Republican senators in areas that are either starting to trend towards the Democrats or are places where they think they can sort of reach above and get a majority. Now, if Donald Trump wins the presidency, but for whatever reason they lost control of the House, this would mean that all of this is about guaranteeing that they could deny him a Supreme Court justice for 4 years, deny him the cabinet that he wants for the next 4 years. How realistic is that the real purpose of this, look, best case scenario for them is they can bounce out a president and don't have to face Trump in 2020, but the next best scenario is it's about trying to win back the Senate in 2020.
Well, that's interesting. I think what you've seen so far is you've had actually members come across the aisle to the Republican side. You had 2 Democrats voting with Republicans against the sham resolution, which just codified Adam Schiff's unfair process. The Senate can't take this up if you haven't had a fair trial, if you haven't heard from the actual fact witnesses, which among them is Adam Schiff, who worked with his committee staff, worked with this whistleblower to start this whole sham in motion. And I think it's going to be at the Democrats' own peril. You mentioned swing districts. There are 31 so-called moderate Democrats in districts where President Trump won in 2016 who are now on the record supporting Nancy Pelosi and Adam Schiff's sham impeachment. They're not working on the border. They're not working on infrastructure. They're not working on health care. They're not working on any issue that actually matters to the American people. And instead, they've hijacked the Intelligence Committee. They've turned it into the Impeachment Committee, and they're not doing any of the business of the American people. So I actually think we will retain control of the Senate, and this is going to help us win back the House in 2020.
All right, so let's talk about it. I mean, we had a big argument on the show in the past hour or so with somebody who was saying, no, it's a clear example of high crimes, misdemeanours, all the rest of it here. This must be somewhat amusing that you're sitting in Washington and we're arguing about this as if we were in the US as well, but the world is watching this. What is the defence of the president's actions? Not the whistleblower, not Biden's son. What is the defence that people who support the president should at least hear from his most ardent supporters?
Just read the transcript. The president is very open about what happened here. It was a cordial conversation between the president of Ukraine and the president of the United States. And it's a free-flowing conversation. And what comes up? First and foremost, the issue of corruption when it comes to the Ukraine cooperating with a legitimate Justice Department investigation into meddling in the 2016 election. It had nothing to do with 2020. So when the president of the United States says, I would like a favor, he's talking about the Attorney General's investigation and John Durham's investigation, the U.S. Attorney of Connecticut, looking at all the areas of 2016 and just how disinformation spread through the highest levels of the Obama administration, and they used that to spy against the Trump campaign. This is a legitimate inquiry. It's ongoing, and all the president asked was cooperation because a lot of it has to do with Ukraine. And so second of all, when you're having a conversation and it's free-flowing, President Zelensky's talking about draining the swamp. I ran on issues like you ran on in the United States, and they're talking about Ukraine, they're talking about corruption. Of course Joe Biden's name comes up. He was running point for the Obama administration. He was supposed to be the guy that was rooting out corruption. And what did he do? 2 months into this process, his son, 2 months after getting kicked out of the Navy, happens to wind himself up on the board of Burisma Holdings, a corrupt Ukrainian natural gas company where Hunter Biden had zero experience, so he was making a minimum of $50,000 a month. That is selling influence. And we already have emails coming out from the State Department at that time that showed that this company, this Ukrainian natural gas company, was lobbying the State Department, using Hunter Biden's name to try to influence policy. We want to know exactly what happened because Joe Biden's on tape bragging about that he got a prosecutor fired for threatening to withhold $1 billion to Ukraine. He wanted this prosecutor fired, who happened to be looking, among other things, into corruption with Burisma Holdings, where his son sat on the board. So all this was just to say, mentioned in passing, President Trump said, that sounds terrible to me. Well, it does sound terrible, and everyone was talking about it. It was in the New Yorker in a profile over the summer. The New York Times had reported on this. And the president, he didn't pressure anybody. He didn't say, you must investigate my political rival. He didn't mention Joe Biden as a political rival. He did not mention 2020. In fact, the only election he mentioned was 2016. This is a normal conversation. And if you're talking about Ukraine, you're talking about corruption, it's hard for Joe Biden's name not to come up.
All right. Who do you think is more likely to be the Democratic nominee, Joe Biden or Hillary Clinton?
Well, hey, Hillary Clinton, she might still throw her hat in the ring. I actually think it would be more likely that she gets in it than Joe Biden. This is a man who's run for president now 3 times. He's never made it out of Iowa before, and you already see polling of him slipping in that state, running as low as 4th place. This man, he's been in the swamp for a half a century. He's never been very impressive, except for the fact that he was the vice president for Barack Obama, and yet what did he accomplish? Nothing. He did nothing for the working class. He did nothing except, have a long trail of corruption associated with his son in every country he went. He's been wrong about every foreign policy issue over the past 4 decades, according to Bob Gates, Obama's Secretary of Defense. So we do not see Joe Biden as a threat in any way, shape, or form, but we certainly don't see Hillary Clinton as a threat either. We've already been there, done that.